Norris was not a morning person, but late nights and long work sessions aren't necessarily avoidable in college. Whether he'd been contributing to group projects, cramming for his exams, or scrolling through the feed on his phone until his vision gave out, sleep was never coming at a reasonable hour. Tonight wasn't much different. The ghoulish blue light from his laptop screen was the only light in his dorm room, casting shadows amongst the furniture and unwashed clothes. His roommate was fast asleep, curled up with noise-canceling headphones, acting as the complete opposite to Norris's all-day, everyday work schedule. It was tough, but it was college. Norris sighed before refreshing his inbox out of routine, where nothing interesting was, except for one thing. Norris didn't recognize the email address at first. Buried underneath junk mail and class reminders from his various professors, he almost deleted it, before the subject line caught his attention. From Elliot. Found something cool. For a moment he just stared at it. The last time they spoke wasn't exactly pleasant. He still remembered the argument like it happened yesterday. The pleading frustration when he told him he was leaving for college. Thought of you when I found this. Check out the email attachment. Unreleased Sonic game ROM. Tell me what you think. The email was so casual. No apology, no acknowledgement of what happened that day, just a cheerful greeting. Like they were still best friends. Norris exhaled sharply, and his jaw tightened as the nature of the email almost pissed him off more than the argument that took place months back. His eyes shifted to the attachment. Sonic.exe. Yeah, not happening. He shut off the laptop without another thought. Elliot must have thought Norris was dumb enough to see a file and forget everything that transpired. The attachment was left unopened. The game could wait. Norris awoke the following morning to the humming noises of his laptop's fan system. The computer was still open, and its faint glow seeped into the room's blinds. He hadn't meant to leave the computer on. At least he didn't think he did. It wasn't a huge concern. He had early classes, meaning there wasn't time to care. He sighed before getting up and grabbing his phone to check the time. 7:13 a.m. Nothing urgent, just a few notifications. But again, out of habit, he checked his email again from his laptop. Found something cool! It was unread like he hadn't opened it before. His initial thought was that maybe the email was reset or some problems syncing between sessions. It also wasn't uncommon for inboxes to refresh in a weird way and mark old things as new. But when he tapped on the email, the contents were the same. For a long while, he just stared at the screen. His initial thought was mild annoyance, like it was some kind of spam loop, or Elliot being an asshole by resending the email over and over. The email was identical, almost word for word, with no forwarding label or change in the phrasing. What made it stranger was that his school email typically filtered out either spam or non-educational facilities. The students were only able to communicate with each other using the school-designated domains, but Elliot did not attend the university Norris did. Norris, now more infuriated at the idea of Elliot simply messing with him for a laugh or out of pettiness, blocked his email and deleted the message from his inbox. Then a new message appeared almost immediately. The email was from Elliot again. Despite having blocked the address, Norris still received the message somehow. Found something cool! The body of the email changed, however. You didn't open it. I thought you'd at least humor me. Try again. The email had the same file attachment. Norris very quickly shut the laptop once again. Standing tall, he rolled his shoulders and forced the whole situation out of his mind. His classes began in 40 minutes, and he wasn't interested in beginning his day by uncovering either an internet bug or Elliot being an ass. If his former friend was trying to scare him, then it wasn't going to work. Norris could feel it even before he stepped outside his home. The campus had a strange energy that morning, but he brushed it off. He wasn't going to let an email cause him any paranoia, as he walked to his first class, determined not to let anything bother him. But the whole day, he continued to think about it. As he entered the campus lecture hall, all he could feel was irritation, which he dismissed as a bad night's sleep coupled with thinking about Elliot fucking with him. The rest of the day passed with the thought fading into the back of his mind. Night came by. Norris was beyond tired, but to him, academic success didn't care about the quality of his rest. He didn't notice it at first. That night, the dorm was quaintly lit, just as it was every night. Quiet except for the laughter and chatter of his classmates down the hall. He shut the door behind him before rubbing his eyes and yawning from exhaustion. He had ignored the email, and that should have been the end of it. But something was wrong. At first it was the little things, like his phone moving ever so slower than before, and it starting in the email app without even having been in there. It wasn't until he laid down that he really noticed how quiet it was. No humming from the air conditioner, no murmur of voices behind the wall, no creak from the upstairs students. The silence was absolute, like the room was holding its breath in. Norris sat up for a moment before searching for his phone, one last check for the night, and also to look to see if Elliot was still screwing with him. As soon as he tapped the screen, the email was open. The message changed. I see you, even when you don't look at me. A creeping unease settled onto Norris. His thumb hovered over the touchscreen before tossing his phone over onto his nightstand. He didn't want to play into the satisfaction Elliot would have had he played into the joke, because it had to have been, otherwise what the hell was happening? He laid back down slowly, but then came the sound of a slow creaking just outside his door. Someone was shifting their weight from one foot to the other, rhythmically, eerily. Norris stayed still and quiet, before being tempted to walk into the living room to get a better listen of the sound. Listening, the footsteps weren't going anywhere. They just shifted back and forth, back and forth. Then, slow and deliberate knocks against the door were made. It was too late for someone to be playing around in the dorm hallways, but when Norris got up to go look at the door, his uneasiness twisted into something else. The light under his door wasn't reaching into his room. Something, or someone, was soaking up the hallway's brightness. Norris didn't move or answer the door. Slowly the shadow shifted, not to move away from the entrance or towards it, just adjusting, like somebody was tilting their head. Watching. Just as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. The noises ceased and the presence was no more. Norris let out a heavy sigh that he hadn't even known he was holding in. He was just tired, that had to be it. Exhausted from a long day, maybe on edge from Elliot's message. Maybe he'd been more upset than he thought. That had to be it. He rolled over onto his side, shutting his eyes. He just had to sleep. Whatever that was probably the product of overworking himself to delusions, or a figment of his imagination. Norris tossed around in his slumber as his body tensed at the creepiness of the day. In his dreams, he heard something. The same creaking noise. Then a voice. Silence doesn't protect you. It only makes me wait. I whispered, and you didn't listen. So now, I'll speak louder. The words weren't loud, but the weight could be felt in Norris's dream condition. His visions were filled with black and red visions of distorted looping buildings and burning hills, tarnished lands and broken cityscapes. Like a distorted reflection in broken glass, everything looped endlessly. Buildings bent at impossible angles and spiral patterns. Gibberish symbols and half-loaded textures flickered all around him as the distorted red sky loomed over. In the distance, a familiar chime ran out. Then, static. Silhouettes stood at the end of the world. The rooftops were paved with the distorted faces of Sonic characters, whose bodies twitched in place, models which barely held themselves together. Above it all, a floating silhouette of Sonic could be seen, hovering almost malevolently in a pose that implied power and absolute control. I see you. Do you see me? The voice called out again, seemingly from the Sonic who stood above it all. The sky shattered into a smear of crimson hues, buildings faded away as something vast and deep revealed itself. And then, a hand, cold and unfamiliar, pressing against the back of his neck. Norris woke up with his heart racing. The laptop screen was on, and the game was running. Norris stared at the screen. He hadn't even touched the game. How was it opened? It was just there. A glitched-out version of Sonic Generations, the title screen being warped beyond recognition. The only option on the menu was play. Norris got up and instantly cut off the monitor before sliding his laptop to the corner of the room as far away from him as possible. Norris exhaled slowly, running his hand through his face to wipe off the sweat. His body felt heavy, still trapped in the warped nightmare in a way. He was staring at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't shut off even with the laptop away. Something about that dream clung to him. Maybe some fresh air would help. With a small sigh, he slipped onto his shoes and grabbed his hoodie from the chair before walking out of his dorm. Most students during this time were either asleep or buried in last-second classwork. Norris took deep breaths as he walked towards the edge of the building. It was quiet enough for him to think clearly. He made his way over to a bench near the fountain and away from the building. The cool air helped clear his head, but the thoughts he had continued to circle back to the dream, email, and the game beginning on its own. It was entirely possible that Elliot had somehow pulled a remote access trick as a dumb prank, even if he doubted he knew how to do that. What was he really afraid of? It was Sonic Generations. Did he really think the game would scare him or show something traumatizing? Sure, it could have been modded, but that didn't mean supernatural forces were at work. He'd stopped being disturbed at the game's existence and decided he'd just delete it once he got back up. He realized it had almost been morning time. Looking down on his phone, it had been 5:34 a.m. As he got up, something shifted in his peripheral. A shadow, darting between buildings in small dashes. Norris stopped and looked over, expecting to see a student walking between the dorms in the parking lot. No one was there. The first thing Norris tried to do once he got back upstairs was open up his laptop in order to delete both the email and the executable file. He had no plans to let the stupid thing linger in the back of his mind. For one final time, he trashed Elliot's emails and moved to remove Sonic.exe from his laptop. As soon as he did, however, the screen flickered. For a moment, the desktop pixels were stretched, as though twisted by invisible hands. The entire screen darkened, leaving a single window open. The game was still there, but the title changed. You didn't listen! The Sega logo didn't appear, neither did the main menu or the title screen. Rather, he dropped directly into a modern Sonic stage, Green Hill Zone. But everything seemed wrong. The trees, a blackened husk, twitching as if something was struggling to break free inside them. The sky crimson red, the colors sickly, all the while Sonic stood in the center of the screen with his usual idle animation frozen. His eyes were wide. Not with heroism or courage, but with an eerie terror. The screen stuttered, but Sonic ran, not sprinting in a scripted sequence. He was running as fast as the engine allowed. The screen shifted. The camera pulled back wider, then wider. Something else was there. A shape formed, barely visible in the shifting sky. A dark figure beyond the red. The moment Norris saw it, it moved all on its own. Then, his monitor tore open. Norris jumped back from his desk. The chair slid against the floor as his breath was caught in his throat. A long, twisted human hand reached through the screen, with its fingers curling against the desk. Plastic and metal bended with ease. The hand twitched before moving towards Norris. Norris hadn't time to think. He ran! Norris locked the door behind him, with his breath ragged, and panicked as his heart continued to pound rapidly. His phone buzzed as he ran out the dorm and onto the campus grounds. Come back to the screen, Norris. Now. You will regret this. See what happens when you choose to defy me. The campus police station was at the end of the main courtyard. They were open 24/7 for students and faculty safety. Someone had to be there. He pushed the door open and raced inside, the lights humming faintly above him. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee and paper. A single officer sat behind the front desk, tapping idly at his keyboard. He glanced up. Something I can help you with? Norris hesitated, because how was he even supposed to explain what just happened? Norris swallowed as he tried to elaborate on what just transpired. I think someone's messing with me. A friend sent me... As he tried to get his words out, an announcement came out of the PA system. Mass casualty event. Evacuate immediately. Stay away from the IT building. Before Norris could process anything, The alarm system blared through the school.
Evacuate using the university evacuation protocol.
The PA system went out before the message finished. The administrator who made the announcement could be heard struggling in the back as a wet splat sound was made, then a shriek, and the collision of metal against metal. The lights to the station cut out all at once. The hum of the light bulbs replaced by the dead quiet, the only glow from the monitors on the desk, before they cut to black. The officer pushed back Norris, along with the rest of security, and stepped outside. Panic surged through the buildings as doors flew open and students rushed towards the exits. The screaming came from everywhere all at once, desperate, panicked, and raw with pain. The quad and center of campus became a slaughterhouse. Students ran in every which direction, sprinting across the open area, with only the glow of emergency lights making them visible. But something was cutting through them faster than any human. A shape. A blur. It moved like a phantom. A smear of motion cut through the student body like a sharp knife. Some were dismembered on the spot in impossible slashes. Others collapsed mid-sprint like the life had been sucked out of them. Blood splattered across the school grounds, gathering under bodies that hadn't even fallen. With no direction. It was chaos. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human. It was everywhere. Another blur of motion behind them. The officer's voice cut off. Norris turned to see the officers collapsing as their sheared apart bodies fell apart. It was playing, and Norris was left to watch. The slaughter winded down. Carcasses lay scattered across the quad, torn apart like thrown-away dolls. Copper and charred meat permeated as putrid smells. The students who tried to escape had all perished. The lucky ones died instantly. The unlucky ones twitched in the agony. An inhuman laugh echoed through the air. Then, it appeared. The inhuman figure slowed down, stepping into view, its disturbing blue eyes locked onto Norris.
You know, Norris.
It took a step forward. I only wanted you. The voice was casual, like they were just having a chat, like they both weren't standing amidst the mass grave of many.
I gave you chances, warnings, a chance to play with me on your own terms.
Its head tilted.
But you ignored me. You didn't listen.
Norris's fingers curled into small fists. Its smile widened with disgusting discoloration.
So, I decided to make you listen. I wanted to see how long it would take for you to care about me.
Norris's breath was shaky. They had nothing to do with this! Its voice dropped.
This was never about them. But you made it about them.
It took a step forward. Its grin stretched wider. Its arms spread out like it was presenting some sort of gift, a voice with mock sincerity and fake kinship.
Now we can finally play that game. Friend.
Norris was the final victim of the RAVENMIRE University massacre, sliced apart by the creature who appeared to play with him. Although that wasn't the end of his existence. A raw, all-consuming pain lingered for a moment. Then, rebirth. Norris thought it was the end, but it was the beginning of an eternity. His body was wrong. His limbs were too light and smooth. Slowly opening his eyes, the skies above were wrong too. A massive empty void overhead. There was grass, not quite green, however. This wasn't his campus. This was not the real world. His fingers dug into the dirt beneath him. No, not fingers. Norris lifted his hands up to his face before discovering he was wearing white gloves. He scrambled, realizing his legs and body moved differently. A pool of still water just a few feet away revealed the horrifying truth. He stared into it, and a stranger stared back. Large gray quills, yellow eyes, and a cartoonish design that never should have been real. Silver the Hedgehog. No, it couldn't be. A figure appeared above him as the shadows shifted. Slowly, Norris raised his head. It was Sonic. But he looked wrong as well. discolored and with irises filled with deceitful intent. Towering over everything, a grin stretched across his face. This time, it wasn't a dream. His smile stretched wider. His voice was a whisper that sank into Norris's soul.
Welcome home.